The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a silent monument to a forgotten science. We are about to uncover 25 ancient Egyptian technologies that shattered the boundaries of their age. This journey will reveal a civilization whose innovations in engineering, medicine, and daily life were centuries ahead of their time. How did they achieve such precision without modern tools? And what secrets are still hidden within their artifacts? What does true technological mastery look like to you? The sheer scale of the Great Pyramid is overwhelming, but its true genius lies in the details invisible to the naked eye. This colossal structure is aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an accuracy that defies simple explanation. Its north-south axis is misaligned by an angle of just 3/60ths of a single degree. To put that into perspective, achieving such precision with the basic tools we assume the Egyptians possessed would be a staggering feat even today. The base of the pyramid forms a near-perfect square with sides that vary in length by less than 0.2%. Imagine trying to square a foundation over 13 acres using only ropes and wooden stakes. How did they manage such perfection? The theories are as fascinating as the mystery itself. Some researchers point to advanced surveying methods using the circumpolar stars, tracking their movements to find true north with incredible fidelity. Others suggest the use of a simple yet effective tool called a merkit, a forked staff with a plumb line that could be used to track stars, effectively creating a primitive transit instrument. Then there are the stones themselves. Millions of limestone and granite blocks, some weighing more than 70 tons, were cut with such exactness that a razor blade cannot fit between them. The granite used in the internal chambers, quarried from a site over 500 miles away, is so hard that it requires diamond-tipped saws to cut today. Yet the Egyptians shaped it with flawless precision. This was not just brute force, it was a symphony of applied mathematics, astronomy, and a deep, intuitive understanding of stone. This level of accuracy in construction on such a monumental scale simply would not be seen again until the advent of the modern industrial age, thousands of years later. Moving from the pyramid's perfect alignment to the very stones it's made of reveals another layer of this ancient puzzle. The Egyptians did not just move mountains of stone, they mastered the art of cutting the impossible. Their primary materials included granite and diorite, rocks so hard they rank just below diamond on the scale of mineral hardness. Working them with primitive tools seems unthinkable, yet they did it with a sophisticated understanding of physics and abrasives. Their toolkit was deceptively simple. They used dolerite pounding stones, balls of a hard, igneous rock, to literally pulverize the granite surface bit by bit. For cutting, they employed copper saws, but these soft metal blades would have been useless on their own. The secret was the constant addition of abrasive slurry, a wet paste of quartz sand. The quartz, harder than the copper but softer than the granite, did the actual cutting as the saw was dragged back and forth. This turned a simple copper blade into a powerful grinding tool, effectively a primitive but highly effective bandsaw. The evidence becomes even more startling when we examine drilled holes. Archaeologists have found core samples from granite and basalt that show perfectly symmetrical grooves. The spacing of these grooves indicates a consistent, remarkably fast feed rate, the speed at which the drill bit was pushed into the stone. This kind of uniformity suggests the use of a mechanical drill, perhaps weighted and turned by a bow that applied a constant, heavy pressure. It was not a man struggling with a hand drill, but a machine doing efficient, repetitive work. A visit to the granite quarries at Aswan offers the ultimate case study, the unfinished obelisk. Had it been completed, it would have been the single largest piece of stone ever carved by the ancient Egyptians, towering at over 137 feet and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. It remains attached to the bedrock, a breathtaking snapshot of the quarrying process. You can see where workers carved deep trenches around its perimeter, prying out the stone not with explosions but with patience and simple tools. They hammered wooden wedges into pre-cut slots and then soaked them with water. As the wood expanded, it created immense pressure, cleanly splitting the granite from the bedrock. The scale is almost beyond comprehension, a project that would challenge modern engineers. Why did they attempt such a colossal task, and how did they plan to transport this behemoth? The unfinished obelisk is a silent testament to an ambition that matched their staggering technical skill, leaving us to wonder what other impossible projects they might have completed. The very stones of the pyramids might hold a secret even more radical than how they were cut. What if the massive blocks were not quarried at all, but were instead poured into place like modern concrete? This is the controversial theory proposed by materials scientist Joseph Davidovits, suggesting the Egyptians invented a form of geopolymer, a man-made stone. The evidence lies in microscopic details. Natural limestone formed over millennia has a crystalline structure, yet samples from the pyramid blocks show a completely different, amorphous structure, filled with tiny air bubbles and even traces of organic fibers like hair and straw, elements never found in a natural quarry. These are the telltale signs of a chemical reaction, of a slurry being mixed and poured. The proposed recipe is deceptively simple. The builders would have crushed soft, natural limestone, then mixed it with an alkaline activator, something like natron salt or a lye made from plant ash and water. This chemical soup would dissolve the minerals, creating a binder that, when combined with aggregate, would harden into a reconstituted limestone block. This cast stone technology would solve several of the pyramid's enduring mysteries at once. It explains the impossible perfection of the joints. Instead of maneuvering 70-ton blocks with millimeter precision, workers could have poured the geopolymer mixture directly into wooden molds on site, each new layer fusing seamlessly with the one below as it hardened. It would also eliminate the need to transport countless multi-ton stones across the desert. Instead, they would carry bags of crushed limestone and barrels of activator, a logistically simpler, though chemically brilliant task. This was not primitive concrete, but a high-tech ancient polymer, a material science so advanced it feels out of place in time. If Davidovits is correct, the Great Pyramid is not just a pile of carved rocks, but the world's largest and most ancient precast structure. This mastery over stone and scale was matched only by their command over something even more elusive, time itself. The ancient Egyptians lived by a rhythm dictated by the heavens and the gods, and their need to measure the hours with precision led to one of history's most elegant inventions. Their obsession with time was not merely practical, it was deeply woven into their religion and astronomy, requiring them to perform rituals at specific moments, day and night. While the sundial served them well under the sun, the night posed a profound challenge. How could a priest know the correct hour to make an offering in the pitch black of a desert night? The answer flowed from a simple principle, the steady, predictable drip of water. They created the clepsydra, or water clock, a device so effective its basic concept would be used for millennia. Imagine a large stone vessel shaped like a flower pot filled to the brim with water. A small, carefully calibrated hole was drilled near the bottom. As the water slowly escaped, its level would drop past a series of meticulously carved markers on the inside of the vessel. Each mark represented a specific hour, its spacing ingeniously calculated to account for the fact that water pressure, and thus the flow rate, decreases as the vessel empties. This was not a simple container with evenly spaced lines. It was an instrument designed with a sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamics. The markings were uneven, closer together near the top where the water flowed out faster, and wider apart near the bottom as the drip slowed. This compensation for variable flow rate is a principle of engineering that feels remarkably modern. For the priests, this steady trickle was the heartbeat of the night, allowing them to track the passage of time with a reliability never before achieved. It was more than a timer, it was one of the very first automated machines, a device that translated a natural, constant process into measurable, actionable information. This fundamental step toward mechanical automation marks a pivotal moment where humanity began to delegate the task of measurement to a machine, a quiet revolution that started with a pot of water and a patient, observant mind. Their command of time and stone was matched by an equally profound understanding of a more mundane challenge, the simple need for cleanliness. Deep within the sun-baked ruins of the palace of Amenhotep III at Malkota, archaeologists uncovered something that shatters our image of ancient life. They found bathrooms, not simple pits in the ground, but sophisticated, tiled rooms featuring limestone lavatories with actual seats, carefully shaped for comfort. These were not isolated luxuries. Adjacent to these rooms were bathing areas where servants would pour water over the bather, and this used water, along with waste, did not simply pool on the floor. The entire system was connected to a network of drainage channels built directly into the walls and under the floors, channeling everything away from the living quarters and out into a designated disposal area. This was a fully integrated, practical sanitation system operating in the Bronze Age. The innovation extended beyond the royal palace. In some temple complexes, engineers installed copper pipes to manage water flow for both ritual purification and practical cleaning. The very presence of these systems speaks to a revolutionary concept of public health. While contemporary civilizations were often contending with waste piling up in streets, the Egyptians had engineered a way to remove it efficiently, understanding that separating waste from living spaces was crucial for health and comfort. This was not a flashy technology like pyramid construction, but in many ways it was just as profound. It represented a societal commitment to hygiene and hydraulic engineering that would not become standard in the Western world for thousands of years. To have a flushless toilet and a dedicated drainage system in a world where such ideas were unimaginable reveals a civilization thinking centuries ahead about the fundamental conditions of daily life. That same ingenuity for solving physical problems was also applied to the most complex human challenge of all, war. After a brutal, day-long stalemate at the Battle of Kadesh, Pharaoh Ramesses II and the Hittite king Hattusili III faced a simple truth. Neither empire could destroy the other. Instead of continuing a cycle of costly conflict, they did something unprecedented. They crafted a durable peace, not with a handshake, but with words carved into a slab of silver. The resulting agreement, known as the Treaty of Kadesh, stands as the world's first fully documented peace treaty, a social technology of breathtaking sophistication. Its clauses read like the foundation of modern international law. The two superpowers agreed to a formal non-aggression pact, promising that neither would invade the other's territory. They pledged mutual defense, vowing to come to each other's aid if a third party attacked. They even established a system for the extradition of political refugees, a remarkably detailed provision for its time. This was not a vague declaration of friendship. It was a specific, binding legal framework designed to manage the relationship between two rival powers for generations. The treaty's revolutionary nature lies in its formality and its survival. It was written down, copied, and displayed in both empires, making its terms public and permanent. It acknowledged the Hittites as equals to the Egyptians, a radical diplomatic concept that moved beyond mere conquest. For a world where victory was typically measured in plunder and subjugation, this agreement established a new paradigm, one where stability and mutual benefit could be more valuable than total domination. This ancient document, over 3,000 years old, is a powerful testament to the idea that the most advanced technology is not always made of stone or metal, but can be a system of ideas, a blueprint for peace that was centuries ahead of its time. That same genius for forging treaties and managing water was channeled into a more artistic, yet equally advanced form of chemistry. They did not just shape the world around them, they learned to create entirely new materials from scratch. One of their most brilliant inventions was a synthetic ceramic known as Egyptian faience. This was not true clay, but a mixture of crushed quartz sand, a small amount of lime, and an alkali like natron or plant ash. When this paste was molded and fired in a kiln, a remarkable chemical reaction occurred. The alkali and the quartz melted just enough on the surface to form a thin, self-glazing layer of glass. The result was a stunning, brightly colored object, typically a vibrant turquoise blue, that was both beautiful and durable. They used this process to create everything from sacred scarab amulets and shabti figurines to intricate beads and tiles, effectively manufacturing the first synthetic gemstones. Faience was more than just decoration. It held deep symbolic meaning, its shimmering blue and green hues representing life, fertility, and the precious waters of the Nile. This was chemistry as high art, a controlled process for creating a brilliant, glassy surface that mimicked semi-precious stones like turquoise and lapis lazuli, making them available to more than just the wealthiest elites. But their ambition did not stop there. Building on this knowledge, Egyptian artisans pushed further into the secrets of silica, pioneering the creation of core-formed glass vessels. This was a painstaking and complex art form. A craftsman would first model a core from a mixture of clay and dung into the rough shape of the intended vessel's interior. This core was then attached to a metal rod. While the core was repeatedly heated, the artisan would trail molten, colored glass over it, slowly building up the vessel's body. They often used different colored glass rods to create intricate patterns, combing and marvering the hot surface to produce swirls, zigzags, and feather-like designs. The final object, once cooled, had to have the inner core carefully scraped out, leaving behind a fragile, hollow vessel of breathtaking beauty. The vibrant colors, from deep cobalt blue to brilliant white and sunny yellow, were not accidental. They were achieved through a sophisticated understanding of metallic additives. Cobalt produced that famous deep blue, copper created a turquoise or green, and manganese yielded a purple or black. This mastery over the chemistry of color, combined with the immense skill required to work the molten glass, resulted in objects of such luxury that they were prized across the ancient world. The Egyptians had not merely found pretty stones, they had learned the alchemical secrets to inventing them, a feat of chemical engineering in a world that should not have possessed such knowledge for another 1,000 years. While their artisans were mastering the chemistry of glass, other Egyptian innovators were perfecting a different kind of creation, one made not from fire and sand but from the reeds of the Nile. The papyrus plant was more than just a riverside weed. It was the raw material for the world's first paper, a technological leap that would revolutionize how humanity recorded its thoughts. The process of transforming this tall, triangular stalk into a smooth writing surface was a marvel of systematic industrial production. It began with harvesting the green outer rind of the plant to reveal the soft, white pith within. This pith was then meticulously cut by skilled workers into thin, vertical strips of uniform width. These strips were not immediately used. They underwent a crucial transformation, being soaked in water for several days, sometimes with the addition of a starch-based glue. This soaking made the fibrous material more pliable and activated the plant's natural sap, which would later act as a powerful adhesive. The actual sheet was assembled in 2 layers. A first set of strips was laid out side by side on a flat, absorbent cloth. Then, a second set was laid directly on top, perpendicular to the first. This cross-weaving pattern was the secret to the sheet's incredible strength. The damp, layered mat was then placed under a heavy press, often just a large stone, for at least 6 days. During this pressing, the plant's natural sap was squeezed out, bonding the 2 layers into a single, incredibly durable sheet as it dried. The final step was to hammer the surface smooth and polish it with a stone or a piece of ivory, creating a perfect, uniform surface ready for a scribe's brush. This was not a casual craft, it was a highly organized, multi-stage manufacturing process. The result was a material that was lightweight, flexible, surprisingly strong, and capable of lasting for thousands of years in the dry Egyptian climate. By creating a portable, relatively inexpensive, and durable medium for writing, the Egyptians did more than invent paper. They engineered the very backbone of complex civilization. This technology enabled the meticulous record-keeping needed to administer a vast empire, the collection of taxes, the drafting of legal codes like the peace treaty, and the preservation of literature, medical texts, and religious spells. It was an information revolution as profound as the digital age, all born from the humble papyrus reed. But the invention of papyrus paper demanded an equally revolutionary technology to make it useful, the art of writing itself. The Egyptians did not develop just one script but two distinct systems, each a masterful tool designed for a specific purpose. On one hand, there were the hieroglyphs, the sacred carved characters that adorned temple walls and royal tombs. These were not mere pictures, they were a complex fusion of art and language, where an owl could represent a sound, a basket could mean a concept, and a god's image conveyed divine power. This was writing as monument, intended for eternity. The beauty and complexity of each symbol was part of its function, to communicate with gods and immortalize kings in a form as permanent as the stone it was carved upon. Yet the daily business of running an empire could not wait for a sculptor to patiently chisel a tax receipt into a granite wall. For this, the scribes developed a second, radically different script known as Hieratic. This was the fast-paced, practical counterpart to hieroglyphs. Imagine a busy administrator, his brush flying across a sheet of papyrus. He had no time for the intricate details of a carved falcon or a serpent. So he transformed them, simplifying the elaborate pictorial forms into quick, flowing, cursive strokes. Hieratic was a script of speed and efficiency, the engine of bureaucracy. A single hieroglyphic symbol, which might take minutes to draw perfectly, could be reduced to a few swift movements of the brush in its hieratic form. This dual system reveals a breathtakingly modern understanding of information technology. They recognized that the medium dictates the message. Hieroglyphs were for permanence and ceremony, a broadcast to the ages. Hieratic was for the immediate needs of the present, for recording harvest yields, drafting legal contracts, sending military dispatches, and composing literary tales like the story of Sinu. By separating the sacred from the practical, they created a writing ecosystem that could manage the unimaginable complexity of a Bronze Age superstate. This was not just an alphabet, it was an information architecture, a system that allowed a handful of literate scribes to coordinate the labor, wealth, and laws of millions, holding the entire civilization together with ink and papyrus. The ink and papyrus that recorded the business of the kingdom also preserved its gaze toward the heavens. Ancient Egyptian astronomers were mapping the cosmos with a precision that would define their civilization for millennia. Their celestial knowledge was not abstract, it was a practical science woven into the very fabric of their survival. They identified constellations we still recognize today, like Osiris, whom they saw in the stars we call Orion. They meticulously tracked the wandering paths of planets like Mars and Venus, referring to them as stars that know no rest. But their most profound astronomical achievement was born from a single annual event, the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. For most of the year, Sirius was invisible, lost in the glare of the sun. Then, one morning just before dawn, it would reappear, glittering briefly on the eastern horizon. This single moment, this first gleam of Sirius after its 70-day absence, was their new year. The Egyptians noticed that this celestial event always coincided with the Nile's annual flood, the lifeblood of their entire agricultural world. The river would swell, bursting its banks and depositing rich, new silt across the farmlands. The stars' return and the river's flood were a synchronized dance, a cosmic signal that the cycle of life was beginning anew. This observation was the catalyst for a revolutionary leap in timekeeping. They developed a solar calendar of 365 days, dividing it into 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 extra days added at the end for festivals. This was a radical departure from the lunar calendars used by their neighbors, which fell out of sync with the solar year over time. The Egyptian calendar, by aligning directly with the sun and this crucial star, remained accurate for centuries. It was a tool of immense power, allowing priests to schedule rituals, farmers to plan their planting, and the state to predict the inundation that governed their entire economy. This system was so effective, so logically sound, that it was later adopted by the Romans, forming the direct foundation for the Julian calendar, which in turn shaped the modern world's conception of the year. In tracking a single star's return, they did more than mark a date. They built a timeless framework for human civilization, a celestial clockwork that still ticks within our own calendars today. Their celestial calendars and papyrus scrolls also guided a far more personal science, the art of healing the human body. This civilization's medical knowledge went far beyond simple herbal remedies, reaching a level of clinical sophistication that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. Their profound understanding of anatomy did not come from dissection, which was culturally forbidden, but from the meticulous, ritualized process of mummification. Over centuries of preparing the dead for the afterlife, they gained an intimate, practical knowledge of the body's internal structure, the placement of organs, and the skeletal framework. This knowledge was systematically recorded and formed the foundation of a truly scientific approach to medicine. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, a text dating back nearly 4,000 years, reads not as a book of magic but as a surgeon's manual. It details 48 cases of injuries, fractures, and wounds, moving methodically from the head down to the spine. For each case, it provides a logical structure, the examination, the diagnosis, a verdict on whether the condition was treatable, and then the specific treatment. The language is starkly clinical. If the physician finds a gaping wound in the head with the skull broken in, he must feel the wound and find the fragments of bone. This is the birth of the scientific method in medicine, observation, diagnosis, and evidence-based treatment. They understood that the brain was the center of motor control, noting that a head injury could cause a loss of function in other parts of the body, a revolutionary insight for its time. Their practical skills were equally advanced. They expertly set broken bones using wooden splints padded with linen, a technique still used in principle today. They practiced sophisticated dentistry, drilling carefully into the jawbone to drain painful abscesses and even loose teeth to adjoining stable ones with gold wire, an early form of dental bridge. Perhaps most touching is their application of engineering to the human form. Archaeologists found a prosthetic wooden toe attached to the foot of a woman's mummy. It was not merely a cosmetic addition, it showed signs of wear and refinements, suggesting it was designed and used for walking, for balance, giving its owner back a piece of her mobility and dignity. This was a holistic view of medicine, one that combined detailed anatomical knowledge, systematic diagnosis, and practical engineering to heal the body in ways that still command our respect and astonishment. Even their most advanced medical procedures relied on a far more fundamental technology, one that harnessed the river itself. The lifeblood of Egypt was the Nile, but its water was useless to crops unless it could be lifted and directed to the fields. For centuries, this backbreaking work was done by hand, with farmers hauling heavy water-filled pots up steep riverbanks. Then, around 1500 BCE, a simple yet brilliant machine appeared, the Shaduf. Its design was a masterpiece of practical physics, a long wooden pole balanced on an upright crossbeam, acting as a fulcrum. On one end hung a leather bucket, and on the other, a heavy counterweight made of mud or stone. A farmer would pull down on the rope to dip the bucket into the river. The counterweight would then do most of the work, effortlessly lifting the full bucket high into the air, where it could be swung over and emptied into an irrigation canal. This was the lever, one of humanity's basic mechanical principles applied on an industrial scale. With a single Shaduf, a farmer could lift over 2,500 liters of water in a day, a task that would have been unimaginable through manual labor alone. The true power of this device was not just in the water it moved, but in the land it unlocked. Before the Shaduf, agriculture was confined to the narrow strip of land immediately adjacent to the river. With this tool, farmers could create a cascading network of canals and basins, lifting water in stages to reach fields that were once considered barren and useless. They were literally pushing the desert back acre by acre, transforming previously infertile land into lush, productive fields. This single invention supercharged Egyptian agriculture, enabling a population boom and providing the food surplus needed to support the vast armies of laborers, artisans, and priests who built the civilization's greatest monuments. It was a hydraulic engine that powered an empire, a simple wooden machine that turned the physics of leverage into the very sustenance of life. This mastery over water extended from the fields directly to the heart of state administration, in structures that were both elegant and ruthlessly efficient. Scattered along the Nile, often housed within beautiful stone chambers attached to major temples, were the Nilometers. These were not mere observation posts, they were the civilization's early warning system, a network of data collection points that turned the river's unpredictable power into manageable statistics. The most common design was a deep, stone-lined well connected directly to the river by a tunnel. A staircase spiraled down its side, allowing priests and officials to descend and read the water level against a precisely carved scale marked in cubits. But they were measuring more than just height. The clarity of the water was equally important. As the flood began, the water was a muddy, silt-laden brown, a sign that the fertile soil from the highlands was on its way. As the inundation peaked and began to recede, the water in the Nilometer would become clearer. This combination of data, the level and the clarity, gave the state a powerful predictive tool. A rise of 12 cubits might mean famine, as the flood was too weak to water all the fields. A rise of 16 cubits promised a bumper crop, enough to feed the nation and fill the granaries. But a rise of 18 or more cubits signaled disaster, a deluge that would wash away villages and drown entire regions. This information was priceless. With it, the pharaoh's administrators could model the entire year's economy months in advance. They could calculate a fair or perhaps an exacting tax rate based on the projected harvest. A low flood meant lower taxes to prevent starvation and social unrest. A high, productive flood allowed for greater taxation to fund royal projects, monuments, and military campaigns. The Nilometer was more than a simple gauge. It was the central processing unit of the Egyptian state, translating hydrological data into fiscal policy. This systematic collection of environmental data for large-scale economic planning was a concept of governance that would not be fully realized again for thousands of years. The sheer ambition of Egyptian engineering becomes almost incomprehensible when we shift our gaze from the pyramids to the needle-like monuments that pierced their sky, the obelisks. These were not just large stones, they were single, solid pieces of granite, carved to a perfect taper and capped with a pyramidion of electrum to catch the first and last rays of the sun. The largest of them, like the Lateran Obelisk now in Rome, originally weighed an estimated 450 tons. The challenge was twofold: moving a skyscraper of stone and then standing it upright with flawless precision. The journey began at the quarries in Aswan, where the monolith was meticulously carved free from the bedrock. Once detached, the real work commenced. The most logical route for transport was the Nile, but how do you load a 400-ton block onto a boat? The Egyptians used the river's own annual cycle as a tool. They would dig a canal from the river directly to the base of the waiting obelisk. When the inundation arrived, the water would flood this canal, floating a massive, specially built barge directly into position beneath the stone. With the barge securely ballasted, workers would then slowly drain the water from the canal, carefully lowering the colossal weight onto the vessel's reinforced deck. It was a perfect synchronization of human ingenuity and natural force. The loaded barge, now a floating mountain, would then be towed down the Nile by a fleet of smaller boats, a journey of hundreds of miles. At the destination, the process reversed. The barge was maneuvered into another pre-dug canal next to the temple where the obelisk would stand. The canal was flooded to lift the barge, and then the water was drained again, setting the obelisk gently onto a prepared foundation. But the most nerve-wracking feat was still to come, the raising. The prevailing theory suggests the use of a gigantic sand pit built directly behind the foundation. The obelisk's base was positioned at the edge of a sloping stone ramp that led down into this pit. Using ropes and immense manpower, teams would slowly pull the top of the obelisk downward, causing its base to pivot forward. As the stone giant began to tilt upward, the sand in the pit beneath it was gradually, carefully removed through side portals. This controlled removal of sand allowed the obelisk to descend in tiny, manageable increments, guided by its own immense weight, until it settled perfectly upright into its waiting socket. One slip, one misjudgment in the sand's flow, and the monolith would shatter into a million pieces. This was not brute force, it was a ballet of physics and logistics, a testament to a civilization that could not only dream in monumental scale, but could also execute those dreams with an engineer's calm, methodical precision. The same understanding of the human body that guided their surgeons also fueled a far more ambitious project, the defiance of death itself. Mummification stands as one of ancient Egypt's most iconic practices, often shrouded in mystery and ritual. Yet beneath the sacred prayers and the jackal-headed masks lay a ruthlessly effective biochemical process, a systematic method to halt nature's relentless cycle of decay. This was not magic, it was applied organic chemistry perfected over centuries of trial and observation. The procedure began with the most delicate step, the removal of the internal organs. Through a small incision in the left side, a practitioner would carefully extract the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines. These were not discarded, but ceremoniously preserved in canopic jars, each jar guarded by a specific deity. The brain, however, was considered unimportant, a mere cranial stuffing. Using a long, hooked bronze tool inserted through the nose, they would carefully liquefy and extract the brain matter piece by piece. The heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and the soul, was always left painstakingly in place. With the organs removed, the body was now a hollow shell, ready for the most critical phase, dehydration. The key to this was natron, a naturally occurring salt found in dried lake beds. This was not ordinary table salt, but a potent mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, a powerful desiccant and a mild antiseptic. The body cavity was packed with natron, and the entire corpse was then completely buried in a mountain of the white salt for a period of 35 to 40 days. This was the turning point. The natron did more than just dry the tissues, it chemically saponified the fats, turning them into a soap-like substance that helped preserve the body further. It drew out every drop of moisture, leaving the skin and muscles shrunken, leathery, and completely hostile to the bacteria that cause rot. After this long desiccation, the body was unearthed. The now brittle remains were washed and anointed with a variety of resins and oils like cedar oil and juniper resin. These substances were not merely fragrant, they acted as powerful biocides, sealing the tissues and creating a final, protective barrier against insects and mold. The empty body cavity was often repacked with linen, sawdust, or even onions to restore a lifelike shape. Then, the meticulous wrapping began, layer upon layer of linen strips with protective amulets placed between the folds. The entire process took 70 days, a number sacred to the star Sirius. What they had achieved was nothing less than the long-term stabilization of organic matter. They had identified the agents of decay, moisture, and bacteria, and engineered a complex, multi-stage chemical process to neutralize them. The proof of their mastery lies in the mummies themselves, individuals whose features remain recognizable, whose skin and hair and bones have endured for millennia. While other cultures simply buried their dead, the Egyptians had pioneered a science of preservation, a triumph of biochemistry that has kept their people visible to us across a gulf of 5,000 years. That same genius for moving mountains of stone was applied to mastering the open sea. While the pyramids stood as static monuments, Egyptian shipwrights built vessels of dynamic power designed to conquer the waves. Their most famous voyages were the great expeditions to the land of Punt, commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut. These were not simple river barges, but massive seafaring ships, some nearly 70 feet long, built to withstand the treacherous currents of the Red Sea and journey to a distant, fabled land. The engineering that made this possible was a masterclass in naval architecture. Instead of building a rigid hull that might shatter under the relentless pounding of the ocean, they designed for flexibility. They began by laying a strong central keel, the backbone of the ship. To this, they attached the ribs and planks using sophisticated, interlocking woodworking joints, a technique akin to a massive floating puzzle. But the true stroke of brilliance was the use of a unique tensioning system. A thick, heavy rope was strung from the bow to the stern, passing over a series of tall, forked crutches. A team of sailors would use a wooden lever to twist this rope, tightening it like a giant tourniquet. This action pulled the entire hull upward at the ends, creating a graceful, pre-stressed curve. This hogging truss, as it's known, acted like a spring, allowing the ship to flex and twist with the swells rather than fight against them. The hull could give and then return to its original shape, a vital feature for surviving stormy seas. These vessels were veritable floating cities, carrying hundreds of men, soldiers, sailors, and trade goods, along with vast supplies of food and fresh water for a voyage that could last many months. They were equipped with a massive square sail to harness the wind and long oars for maneuvering in calm conditions or near treacherous coastlines. This was not a tentative coastal hop, but a bold, open water crossing. The ships of Punt enabled Egypt to project its power far beyond the Nile Valley, establishing trade networks that brought back gold, ivory, exotic woods, live frankincense trees, and rare animals. They were the strategic instrument of an empire, a technology that turned the sea from a barrier into a highway, rivaling the capabilities of ships that would not sail from Europe for another 2,000 years. Every towering column and perfectly straight wall began with a tool of beautiful simplicity. The Plumb was the ancient architect's unwavering judge of truth, a tear-shaped stone or metal weight suspended from a single linen cord. When held against a rising stone wall, its unerring vertical line, dictated by gravity itself, showed the builders exactly where they had strayed. This was the absolute standard for perpendicular construction, a tool that ensured the immense weight of a pylon or a pyramid's core would be distributed perfectly downward, generation after generation. But a vertical line alone was not enough to create a stable foundation. For the equally critical horizontal plane, they used another elegant device, the merkit. Far more than just a stargazer's tool, its application in construction was just as vital. A basic merkit consisted of a palm rib with a notch cut into one end, mounted on a flat, level base. By sighting along this notch toward a second, identical merkit held by an assistant some distance away, a worker could establish a perfectly level baseline across a vast construction site. This simple wooden tool, used in pairs, could project a straight, flat line over hundreds of feet, ensuring that the first course of stones for a temple platform was laid with unerring accuracy. The true genius of Egyptian construction lies not in any single lost technology, but in the systematic, universal application of these fundamental tools. From the smallest provincial shrine to the grandest pyramid complex, every master builder worked from the same basic principles, verified by the same Plumb and merkit. This was a standardized scientific methodology enforced across an entire civilization. It created a common language of precision that allowed teams of thousands, working over decades, to produce structures whose joints were seamless and whose walls still stand perfectly plumb after thousands of years. This relentless commitment to foundational geometry, checked and rechecked with these simple instruments, is what gave their architecture its timeless stability, turning ambitious designs into immortal stone. The Plumb, Bob, and Merkit gave them perfect verticals and level lines, but the great temples and pyramids also demanded perfectly square corners. This geometric precision was entrusted to a special class of professionals known as the rope stretchers. These men were the master surveyors of their age, and their most vital tool was a simple, knotted rope. Their genius lay in understanding a timeless principle of geometry, the 3-4-5 right triangle. A rope would be carefully prepared, divided by knots into 12 equal segments. 3 men would then each take hold of the rope at a specific knot. One would hold the knot marking the 3rd segment, another the 7th, and the 3rd the 12th, creating lengths of 3, 4, and 5 units between them. When the rope was pulled perfectly taut, the angle formed between the 3-unit and 4-unit lengths was an exact perfect 90 degrees. This was the foundation of their entire built world. After the annual flood receded, washing away the field markers for countless farms, the rope stretchers would walk the rich, wet silt. Using their knotted ropes, they could swiftly and accurately re-establish the square boundaries of every plot of land, ensuring that each farmer received back exactly what he owned. This was not just a matter of fairness, it was the bedrock of social order and a stable food supply for the entire kingdom. The same technique, scaled up, was used to lay out the vast foundations of the Great Pyramids and sprawling temple complexes. Before a single stone was set, these surveyors would stretch their ropes across the cleared desert floor, marking perfect right angles and ensuring that the entire structure was square to the world. They were applying a theoretical mathematical truth, the Pythagorean theorem, over 1,000 years before Pythagoras himself was born. Their work was a perfect fusion of abstract knowledge and physical necessity, a reminder that the greatest structures in history often began with nothing more than a length of carefully knotted string. Even their pursuit of beauty was a form of high science. The iconic, dramatic eye makeup worn by pharaohs and commoners alike was far more than a fashion statement. It was a triumph of early chemistry and practical medicine. The 2 most common cosmetics, the stark black coal and the vibrant green eye paint, were each engineered from specific minerals for specific life-saving purposes. The deep black coal was meticulously ground from galena, a lead sulfide ore. While the idea of applying lead near the eye sounds alarming to us, for the Egyptians it was a powerful protective agent. The lead salts in the galena stimulated the production of nitric oxide within the skin, a chemical that boosts the immune system and helps fight off bacterial infections. In the marshy, fly-ridden environment of the Nile, this coal liner acted as a constant preventative barrier against common eye diseases like conjunctivitis and trachoma, which could easily lead to blindness. At the same time, the thick black lines helped to reduce the sun's harsh glare reflecting off the desert sand and the river's surface, functioning much like the black grease worn by modern athletes. The green eye paint, made from finely crushed malachite, a copper carbonate mineral, served a similar medicinal role. Copper is a well-known antibacterial and antifungal agent, and the malachite paste would have helped to prevent and treat eye infections while also repelling insects. Their chemical innovation did not stop at the eyes. They developed a whole apothecary of personal care, creating deodorants from citrus and cinnamon, and formulating some of the world's first solid perfumes. These were not simple flower waters, but complex recipes that combined natural resins like frankincense and myrrh with oils and animal fats, which were then molded into cones to be worn on the head. As the wearer moved, body heat would slowly melt the cone, releasing a continuous, pleasant fragrance that also helped to mask the less pleasant smells of a pre-industrial world. They created moisturizing creams from a base of beeswax and vegetable oils, often infused with extracts of aloe vera to soothe sunburned skin, and they made exfoliating scrubs using sea salt and natron. This was a society that had mapped the relationship between chemistry and the human body, creating a sophisticated cosmetic science that served the dual, inseparable purposes of health and adornment, proving that their most advanced technologies were often those worn on the skin. That same ingenuity for securing the kingdom was applied to protecting the private space of the home. In a world of simple latches, the Egyptians engineered the very concept of personalized security with the world's first pin-tumbler lock. Crafted entirely from wood, this was a mechanical puzzle of brilliant design. The heart of the device was a large, heavy wooden bolt fixed to the inside of the door. Embedded vertically within this bolt were a series of pins of varying lengths, which dropped down into corresponding holes in the bolt's housing, effectively locking it solidly in place. The key to this puzzle was, of course, the key itself, a large, cumbersome wooden object that looked more like a modern toothbrush with long, uneven pegs protruding from its end. To unlock the door, this unique key would be inserted into a slot beneath the bolt. As it was pushed upward, its precisely placed pegs would engage the pins inside the lock, lifting each one to exactly the right height to clear the housing. Only then could the bolt be slid back, retracting into the door and freeing it to open. This was a revolutionary leap in personal autonomy. For the first time, security was not just a matter of a heavy bar or a trusted guard, but a portable secret held in the hand. The lock was a physical algorithm, a sequence that had to be executed perfectly. A key with pegs even slightly too short or too long would fail to lift the pins to the correct alignment, leaving the bolt firmly secured. This meant that every lock was unique, its secret defined by the specific arrangement of pin lengths, and every key was a custom-made counterpart. It provided a level of property protection and personal privacy that was previously unimaginable, transforming a simple door into a guarded threshold. This wooden marvel was not just a lock, it was the ancestor of every mechanical security device that followed, a testament to an inventive mind that saw the need to secure not just tombs and temples, but the quiet sanctity of daily life. The same precision that secured a wooden door was channeled into the most precious of materials, transforming raw metal into objects of breathtaking power and beauty. The Egyptians were not merely skilled goldsmiths, they were master metallurgists whose command over heat and chemistry feels almost supernatural. Their work with gold achieved a level of perfection that is difficult to replicate even with modern tools. They created massive vessels for temple offerings, seamless bowls and goblets so large and perfectly formed they seemed to have been spun from the sun itself. The secret to these flawless creations was a technique called lost wax casting. An artisan would first sculpt the desired object, a statue of a god or the body of a vessel, out of beeswax, capturing every minute detail. This wax model was then encased in a thick, fireproof clay, forming a mold. Small channels were left open. The entire mold was then baked in a kiln. The heat would melt the wax, which would drain out through the channels, leaving behind a perfect, hollow cavity in the shape of the original sculpture. This is where the magic happened. Molten gold, heated in a crucible to a searing liquid state, was poured into the empty cavity, filling every microscopic crevice left by the vanished wax. Once the gold cooled and solidified, the outer clay mold was broken away, revealing a solid gold object of stunning complexity, a perfect one-of-a-kind piece. But how did they assemble intricate pieces of jewelry, linking chains and setting stones without any visible seam? They mastered the art of soldering with a finesse that is still admired today. They created a solder from a unique alloy of gold and silver, which had a slightly lower melting point than the pieces they were joining. using blowpipes to direct the flame of a small oil lamp with pinpoint accuracy. They would heat the joint just enough to melt the solder but not the underlying gold. The molten solder would flow into the seam by capillary action, bonding the pieces together. When cooled and polished, the join was so perfect it became virtually invisible to the naked eye, creating the illusion of a single continuous form. This was not just craft, it was a deep scientific understanding of melting points and material behavior. Their genius, however, was not reserved for gold alone. They applied the same rigorous principles to the workaday world of copper. They operated massive smelting operations, using furnace temperatures in excess of 1084 degrees Celsius to extract pure copper from its rocky ore. But pure copper is soft, so they advanced into the science of alloying, deliberately mixing the copper with tin to create bronze, a metal that was harder, more durable, and held a sharper edge. This was not an accidental discovery, it was a controlled chemical process. They produced bronze tools by the thousands, from chisels that could cut granite to saws that could shape furniture, and they fashioned bronze weapons, swords, and spearheads that equipped the armies that secured an empire. Their most awe-inspiring copper project was not a tool of war, but a monument to peace and power. For the mortuary temple of Pepi II, they cast a colossal copper statue of the king that stood over 6 feet tall. Casting a statue of this size from copper is a staggering logistical feat, requiring the simultaneous operation of multiple furnaces to produce enough molten metal to fill a giant mold in a single continuous pour. A single misstep, a single cold spot, and the entire statue would be flawed. This was industrial-scale metallurgy, a testament to a civilization that understood the soul of metal, bending it to their will for everything from the most delicate personal adornment to the most monumental expressions of state power. That mastery over spinning clay began not with a grand invention, but with a simple, rotating platform. While the basic potter's wheel was known to other cultures, the Egyptians elevated it into an engine of mass production. Before its widespread adoption, every pot, bowl, and jar was painstakingly built by hand, a slow process of coiling and pinching clay that resulted in unique, often thick-walled and uneven vessels. The introduction of the kick wheel changed everything. A potter could now use his feet to spin a heavy stone flywheel, keeping both hands free to guide the clay as it rose from a formless lump into a thing of perfect symmetry. The centrifugal force pulled the clay outward and upward, allowing the artisan to stretch it into walls of astonishing thinness and uniformity. This was not just a new way to make pots, it was a fundamental shift in philosophy, from crafting individual artifacts to manufacturing standardized products. A single potter could now produce dozens of identical vessels in the time it once took to create one. This revolution rippled through every level of society. For the state, it meant the efficient production of thousands of identical storage jars for grain, wine, and oil, the essential commodities that fed cities and paid laborers. For trade, it meant cargoes of perfectly uniform amphorae, whose consistent size and shape made them easy to stack in the holds of ships, maximizing space and protecting precious goods on long journeys. In the home, it meant that a simple dish or cup was no longer a valuable, handmade object, but an accessible, replaceable item for everyday use. This was the ancient equivalent of the assembly line, a technology that transformed a vital craft from an art into an industry, creating the material backbone for a civilization that ran on consistency and scale. Their genius for invention was often matched by a remarkable talent for adoption and refinement. When new technologies appeared on the horizon, the Egyptians did not simply borrow them, they re-engineered them for peak performance. This was never more evident than with the horse and chariot, a technology that arrived from foreign lands and was transformed into the ultimate instrument of Egyptian military supremacy. The chariot was not their creation, but the specific design they perfected was uniquely their own. While other nations built heavy, cumbersome platforms, Egyptian craftsmen engineered a marvel of lightweight tactical speed. The chassis was a slender, open framework of seasoned hardwood, often ash or elm, bent and joined with exquisite skill. Instead of solid, wheel-slowing sides, the body was a mere half-wall of stretched leather or woven leather strips, providing just enough protection for the crew without sacrificing agility. The most revolutionary element was the wheel, with only 4 or 6 slender spokes compared to the 8 or more found on heavier foreign models. The Egyptian wheel was a masterpiece of rotational efficiency. The axle was positioned at the very rear of the chassis, a design choice that created an incredibly tight turning radius, allowing the chariot to pivot almost on the spot. This entire featherweight machine, often weighing less than the 2 men it carried, was pulled by a pair of specially bred horses. The result was a weapons platform of breathtaking speed and maneuverability, a cavalry unit that could strike and withdraw before an enemy infantry line could even react. On the battlefield, the chariot was less a tank and more a mobile archery platform. A skilled driver would guide the team at a full gallop along the enemy's front lines, while the warrior, standing braced in the rocking car, unleashed a storm of arrows with pinpoint accuracy. They could shatter formations, hunt down fleeing troops, and deliver officers to critical points in the battle. This perfect integration of animal power, advanced woodworking, and tactical doctrine gave the Egyptian army a battlefield advantage that dominated the Bronze Age for centuries, proving that the most powerful technology is sometimes the one you masterfully make your own. Yet the speed of a chariot or the strength of a bronze sword would be useless without a system to command them. The true engine of the Egyptian Empire was not a tool of stone or metal, but an invisible framework of power, a societal operating system run by the world's first grand bureaucracy. This was a technology of administration, a complex hierarchy designed to manage every facet of life for millions of people across hundreds of miles of Nile Valley. At the apex sat the pharaoh, a living god, but the day-to-day functioning of the state was delegated to an army of administrators. The most powerful of these was the vizier, the pharaoh's chief minister, who acted as the kingdom's chief executive officer. He oversaw a sprawling network of departments, each with a specific, vital function. There was the treasury, which meticulously tracked the nation's wealth in grain, gold, and goods. The Department of Agriculture managed the all-important harvests and the distribution of seed. The Department of Works was responsible for the Crown's monumental building projects, from digging canals to raising temples. This was not a simple chain of command, but an interlocking system of specialized roles, a prototype of the modern cabinet. The entire machine was fueled by information recorded on endless rolls of papyrus. Scribes in every department recorded tax receipts, census data, court proceedings, and inventory levels. This river of data flowed upward from local village scribes to regional governors and finally to the vizier's office in the capital. There, officials could analyze the information, model the economy based on Nilometer readings, and issue commands that would ripple back down through the hierarchy. How did they coordinate the labor of tens of thousands of workers for a single pyramid project? The bureaucracy had the answer. Papyrus payroll records found at the Giza Plateau show that workers were organized into crews with names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaura. They were divided into shifts, paid in bread, beer, and other goods, and even given medical leave for injuries. This was not slave labor, but a state-managed workforce, a civil service of stone. This administrative technology transformed human effort into a manageable resource. It allowed for the stockpiling of surplus grain to feed cities and prevent famine. It enabled the conscription and supply of massive armies. It turned the ambitious vision of a single ruler into the coordinated action of an entire civilization. The pyramids and temples are the most visible legacy of ancient Egypt, but they are merely the output, the final product, of a revolutionary system of social organization that was, in its own right, one of their most breathtaking inventions. The final technology on our list stands not as a single invention, but as a powerful architectural pair, a statement in stone that perfectly encapsulates the Egyptian mind. The massive Pylon gateway was far more than a grand entrance to a temple. It was a symbolic mountain range carved by human hands, representing the primordial hills from which the sun god first emerged at creation. Its two towering masses, sloped and crowned with a cavetto cornice, framed the passage from the mundane world into the sacred precinct. But these were not blank walls, they were the civilization's greatest billboards. Their vast, flat surfaces were carved with colossal reliefs of the pharaoh, shown smiting his enemies or making offerings to the gods, a permanent public declaration of divine power and military might that awed every citizen and foreign envoy who approached. This symbolic gateway was almost always accompanied by the obelisk, a needle of stone reaching for the sun. While we have already explored the staggering engineering of its transport and raising, its function was equally brilliant. The obelisk was a solar symbol, its pyramidion cap sheathed in electrum to blaze with the first and last light of Ra, yet it also served a deeply practical purpose. The monument itself and the long shadow it cast acted as the marker for a giant sundial. The temple precinct around it was often laid out with precise markers on the ground, allowing priests to track the passing hours of the day by the movement of the shadow across the sacred space. This pairing of the horizontal, imposing pylon with the vertical, piercing obelisk demonstrates a genius for synthesis. It was a perfect fusion of monumental scale, profound religious symbolism, and practical, everyday function. They created an environment where architecture was not just a container for ritual, but an active participant in it, a machine for worship that told time, inspired awe, and projected state power simultaneously. This holistic approach to design, where form and function, heaven and earth, were seamlessly woven together, is a legacy that has inspired architects and shaped monumental spaces across the world for millennia. From the monumental scale of the pyramids to the intimate flow of water in a palace drain, we have journeyed through 25 testaments to a civilization that defies the very label of ancient. This was not a collection of lucky accidents or isolated flashes of genius. It was the output of a society built on a foundation of organized curiosity, where the inquisitive mind was the most valued technology of all. They possessed a unique synthesis of vision and precision, capable of dreaming in epochs and then methodically turning those dreams into reality with plumb bobs and papyrus. They engineered peace treaties as skillfully as they engineered obelisks, and they applied the same rigorous chemistry to preserving the human body as they did to creating synthetic gemstones. Every innovation, from the Shaduf watering the fields to the bureaucracy feeding the workers, was an interconnected piece of a grand, functioning system. So the next time you hear the word ancient, let it conjure not images of primitive struggle, but of a sophisticated, dynamic culture whose mastery over their world still echoes across 5,000 years. We would love to hear which of these technologies reshaped your understanding the most. Was it their revolutionary concrete, their early form of international law, or perhaps the simple, brilliant lock that secured a family's home? Share your thoughts in the comments below.